My name is Jacqueline, 32 years old, and my peaceful Tuesday was shattered by a call from my neighbor Sarah. There was a moving truck parked in my driveway. My stomach dropped. I had absolutely not hired movers. I rushed out of an important meeting, my heart pounding through my chest as I sped home. When I pulled up, I froze. There stood my parents and sister Amanda with her husband and kids, unloading furniture into my house. Without permission. Let me know where you are watching from, and hit that like and subscribe button to see what happened when they realized I was home. I have always been the responsible one. For the past 10 years, I have worked as an accountant at Wilson Financial Group, meticulously building my career one long day at a time. My coworkers often joked that I was married to my spreadsheets, and honestly, they were not entirely wrong. While other people my age were traveling or going out every weekend, I was saving. I had a dream, and that dream had an address. 3 years ago, after countless overtime hours and living in a tiny studio apartment where I could touch my refrigerator from my bed, I finally had enough for a down payment on a house. Not just any house, but a beautiful 3-bedroom craftsman-style home on Maple Street in a quiet neighborhood with tree-lined sidewalks and neighbors who actually waved hello. Every single brick of that house represented my sacrifice and hard work. The day I got the keys, I sat alone on the hardwood floor of the empty living room and cried. Happy tears. Tears that said I had made it despite everything. Despite my family never believing I could do it on my own. Speaking of my family, we have always had a complicated relationship. My parents, Richard and Diane, are traditional people who believe family comes before everything, including personal boundaries. Growing up, this meant one set of rules for me and another for my younger sister, Amanda. Amanda is 4 years younger than me and has always been the baby of the family. Pretty charming, and somehow always in some kind of trouble that everyone else needed to fix. When she failed classes, my parents hired tutors. When she totaled her first car, they bought her another one. When she dropped out of community college, they just shrugged and said college was not for everyone. Meanwhile, I worked part-time jobs through high school and college, maintained a 4.0 GPA on my own, and paid for my own car insurance from the age of 16. The disparity was obvious to everyone except my parents. When Amanda met Kevin at 22, my parents were thrilled. He had a steady job at his uncle's construction company, and they thought he would provide the stability Amanda needed. They married after just 6 months of dating, and within 2 years they had 2 children, Lily and Max, currently aged 5 and 3. The problem was Amanda and Kevin shared the same approach to money. They saw it as something to be spent, not saved. They lived in a rental apartment they could barely afford, drove cars with payments that stretched their budget, and seemed genuinely surprised each month when bills arrived. Over the years, they had borrowed money from me more times than I could count. At first, it was small amounts, $200 for a car repair, $500 when they were short on rent, but the amounts grew, as did the frequency of their requests. The final straw came 6 months ago, when they asked me for $8,000 to cover back rent they owed. I finally said no. The conversation did not go well. Amanda cried my parents, called me selfish, and Kevin muttered something about how I would never understand what it was like to have kids. But I stood firm. They needed to learn financial responsibility, and my endless bailouts were not helping. After that confrontation, things were tense between us. We still saw each other at family gatherings, but there was an undercurrent of resentment. I tried not to let it bother me, and instead focused on making my house truly mine. I had painted every room myself, choosing colors that made me feel calm and happy. Soft sage green for the living room, a peaceful blue for my bedroom, and a cheerful yellow for the kitchen. I had converted one of the spare bedrooms into a home office where I sometimes worked on weekends or tackled freelance accounting jobs for extra income. The other spare room was my reading nook and guest room, with a daybed and bookshelves covering an entire wall. My neighbors Sarah and John Thompson quickly became friends. They were in their 50s with grown children who had moved away, and they seemed to adopt me as an honorary daughter. Sarah would bring over cookies she had baked, and John helped me install a ceiling fan in my bedroom when the summer heat became too much. They were the kind of neighbors everyone wishes, for attentive without being intrusive. My life had settled into a pleasant routine. Work during the week, home improvement projects, on weekends dinner with friends twice a month, and the occasional date that usually went nowhere special. I was content, and I had plans. In fact, in just 3 days, I was scheduled to go on a business trip to Chicago to represent our firm at a financial conference. I had my presentation prepared, my hotel booked, and a new outfit hanging in my closet. Little did I know that my peaceful life was about to be completely upended by the people who were supposed to care about me the most. Tuesday morning started like any other. I was at my desk by 7:30, reviewing financial projections for our quarterly meeting. My boss, Mr. Lawson, had entrusted me with presenting our department's performance metrics to the board that afternoon, and I wanted everything to be perfect. The conference room was booked for 2 o'clock, and I had just sent the finalized presentation to the IT department to set up. My phone rang at 9:45. Seeing Sarah's name on the screen, I almost let it go to voicemail. The board meeting preparation was at a critical stage, and I rarely took personal calls during work hours. Something made me answer, though. Maybe it was the unusual timing, since Sarah knew my work schedule, or perhaps some sixth sense was already warning me. My cheerful hello was met with Sarah's concerned voice. "Jacqueline, honey, are you expecting a delivery today? There is a moving truck in your driveway, and people are unloading furniture and boxes into your house." The pen I was holding fell from my fingers. A moving truck? No, absolutely not. I am not expecting any deliveries, especially not furniture. My mind raced through possibilities. Wrong address burglars. With an elaborate cover story. Some kind of prank. Sarah continued, her voice growing more worried. "Well, there is definitely activity happening. A large white truck from Eagle Moving Company. There are several people, including a couple with 2 small children. They have been unloading for about 30 minutes now." My blood ran cold. A couple with 2 small children. It could not be a coincidence. "Sarah, can you see if there is a woman with blonde hair cut in a bob, probably wearing something colorful, and maybe an older couple, the man bald with glasses?" "Yes, actually. The blonde woman is directing where boxes should go, and the older gentleman is helping carry in a coffee table right now. Do you know them?" I closed my eyes, a sickening feeling washing over me. They are my family, my sister, her husband, their kids, and our parents. I took a deep breath. "Sarah, I had no idea they were coming, let alone moving things into my house." There was silence on the other end of the line as Sarah processed this information. "Oh dear, should I go over and say something? They seem very settled already." "No, please do not confront them. I am leaving work now. I will be there in about 20 minutes. I gathered my things, my hands shaking slightly. "And Sarah, thank you for calling me." After hanging up, I immediately tried calling my parents. Straight to voicemail. I tried Amanda next with the same result. Even Kevin's phone went unanswered. This was not a coincidence. They were deliberately avoiding my calls. I hurried to Mr. Lawson's office, knocked once, and entered without waiting for a response, something I would never normally do. He looked up from his computer, surprised. "Mr. Lawson, I am so sorry, but I have a serious emergency at home. Someone is breaking into my house right now. The words tumbled out before I could form a more professional explanation. To his credit, Mr. Lawson did not hesitate. Go, Jacqueline. We will reschedule the board presentation. Just keep me updated and let me know if you need anything. The drive home was excruciating. 20 minutes felt like 20 hours as my mind conjured one scenario after another. What could they possibly be thinking? Moving into my house, without even asking, without even telling me. As I drove, memories flooded back. Amanda borrowing my clothes without permission as teenagers and returning them stained or torn. My parents giving away my belongings to cousins because you do not need 2 winter coats. The time I came home from college to find my bedroom had been converted to a home gym because you are only here on holidays anyway. There had always been this underlying message that what was mine was not really mine, that my boundaries did not matter, that my space, my things, and my feelings were secondary to everyone else's needs and wants. But this was beyond anything they had done before. This was my house, my name on the mortgage, my hard-earned money paying for every single square foot. As I turned onto my street, my knuckles white on the steering wheel, I felt something shift inside me. A lifetime of accommodating, of understanding, of making excuses for their behavior crystallized into something hard and immovable. I was done. Whatever explanation they had, whatever story they had told themselves to justify this invasion, it would not be enough. Not this time. The scene that greeted me when I pulled up to my house was surreal. A large white moving truck with Eagle Moving Company emblazoned on the side took up most of my driveway, forcing me to park on the street. My normally pristine front lawn was littered with boxes, furniture pieces, and random household items. A child's bicycle I had never seen before leaned against my mailbox. Toys were already scattered across the grass. Sarah stood on her porch across the street, arms crossed, watching the activity with a frown. She gave me a small wave as I exited my car, and I nodded in acknowledgement, grateful for her call, but too focused on the chaos before me to stop and chat. As I walked up my own pathway, a mover brushed past me, carrying a pink princess lamp I recognized from my niece Lily's bedroom. The man did not even glance at me, too busy following directions from someone inside. This was not a misunderstanding or a surprise visit. This was a full-scale moving operation. I pushed open my front door, which was propped with a doorstop I did not own, and stepped into what felt like an alternate reality. My living room, once a peaceful sanctuary of soft greens and carefully chosen furniture, was now crowded with boxes labeled kitchen stuff and Kevin's tools. A large sectional sofa I had never seen before was awkwardly positioned against one wall, clearly waiting to be arranged once my own furniture was removed. My beautiful hand-woven rug, a splurge I had saved months for, was rolled up and leaning in a corner, replaced by a stained beige carpet that must have come from Amanda and Kevin's apartment. Family photos I did not recognize already hung on my walls. In a daze, I walked through to my kitchen. There I found my mother reorganizing my cabinets. My carefully arranged baking supplies, now jumbled together with faded plastic sippy cups and cartoon character plates. "Mom," my voice sounded distant to my own ears. "What is going on?" She turned, and for a brief moment, something like guilt flashed across her face before being replaced by a bright smile. "Jacqueline, you are home early. We wanted to be more settled before you got back from work. Surprise." Before I could respond, Amanda burst in from the hallway leading to the bedrooms. "Mom, I think we should put the kids in the blue room. It has better light for Max's naps." She stopped short when she saw me. "Oh, hi, Jack. What are you doing in my house?" I asked, my voice dangerously calm. My father appeared from my home office carrying a box of what looked like my financial documents and work supplies. Now, Jacqueline, do not get upset. We were going to call you at lunch. Call me. To tell me what exactly? That you have broken into my house and are rearranging it without my knowledge or permission. I could feel my pulse pounding in my temples. Amanda stepped forward, her expression a practiced mix of contrition and pleading that I had seen countless times over the years. We got evicted, Jack. The landlord raised the rent again, and we just could not make it work. We were going to tell you, but everything happened so fast. So instead of calling me, you decided to move into my house while I was at work. How did you even get in? I demanded. My mother looked away suddenly, very interested in organizing a drawer of utensils. We used the spare key you gave us for emergencies. The key? Of course. I had given them a key when I first moved in for emergencies only, which I kept at my parents' house. A key I now regretted with every fiber of my being. Where are my things from my bedroom? I asked, noticing that Amanda was wearing a sweatshirt that looked suspiciously like one of my favorites. We moved your stuff to the smallest bedroom, my father said, as if this was a perfectly reasonable solution. Amanda and Kevin need the master bedroom because there are two of them and they need the extra closet space. I felt like I had stepped into the Twilight Zone. They had moved me out of my own master bedroom, without asking. In a daze, I walked down the hallway to see for myself. My beautiful, peaceful blue master bedroom, with its ensuite bathroom and walk-in closet, had been completely transformed. Amanda and Kevin's queen-sized bed now dominated the space. Their mismatched furniture crowded the room. Pictures of their wedding and the kids covered the walls. The air freshener they used, a cloying artificial vanilla scent I had always disliked, already permeated the space. I continued to what had been my home office, the room where I spent weekends catching up on work and occasionally took on freelance projects for extra income. It was now clearly intended to be the kids' room. My desk was pushed into a corner, my computer disconnected, and my files stacked haphazardly on the floor. Two small beds were partially assembled in the center of the room. Finally, I checked the smallest bedroom, the one I had lovingly set up as a reading room and occasional guest room. My queen-sized mattress had been jammed into the space without its frame. My clothes were piled on the floor of the closet, many still on hangers, but no longer organized by type or color as I kept them. My bedside table was wedged between the mattress and the wall, my alarm clock unplugged. I stood there, trying to process the violation I felt. Every corner of my home, every space I had carefully created, had been invaded and rearranged without a single thought for my feelings or consent. When I returned to the kitchen, Kevin had joined the group. He was sitting at my dining table, drinking a beer from my refrigerator and watching something on his tablet. He barely looked up when I entered. We were going to set up the TV in the living room, but we need to figure out where to put your bookcase first, he said, by way of greeting. You might want to consider getting rid of some of those books. You do not need that many. Something inside me snapped at his casual dismissal of my possessions, but I held it together. How long are you planning to stay? I asked the room at large. My parents exchanged glances. My mother spoke first. Well, honey, Amanda and Kevin's lease situation is complicated. They owe some back rent, so finding a new place right away is going to be difficult. We thought maybe 3 to 6 months, Amanda added quickly, just until we get back on our feet. We will contribute to groceries, of course. 3 to 6 months. They plan to take over my house for possibly half a year, and judging by their past financial behavior, I doubted they would be back on their feet anytime soon. And who decided this? Because I certainly did not agree to it, I said, my voice shaking slightly with the effort of maintaining composure. Jacqueline, my father said, using his warning tone, the one that had shut down so many discussions when I was younger. Your sister and her family need help. They have nowhere else to go. You have 3 bedrooms in this house, and you live alone. It only makes sense. It makes sense to who I demanded. To you, because it does not make sense to me that my family would move into my home without even asking me first. It does not make sense that you would rearrange my belongings, take over my bedroom, and disrupt my life without so much as a phone call. Amanda's eyes welled with tears right on cue. I knew you would be mad. I told Mom we should wait and talk to you first, but we had to be out by noon today, and we had nowhere to take our stuff. I did not believe her for a second. This level of organization, the way they had already claimed spaces and rearranged things, spoke of planning, not desperation. I want all of you to leave, I said firmly. Pack your things and go. Go where? My mother asked, incredulous. They have 2 small children, Jacqueline. Be reasonable. You have a house, I pointed out. They can stay with you. My father scoffed. We do not have the space. Your mother converted the spare bedroom into her crafting room after you moved out. Of course. Their space was sacred, but mine was communal property. I opened my mouth to argue further when I noticed something on the counter that made my blood run cold. My small fireproof safe was open, its contents disturbed. I kept emergency cash, my passport, and important documents in that safe. The cash, nearly $2,000, was gone. Who opened my safe? I asked, my voice deadly quiet. The silence in the kitchen was deafening. Finally, Kevin spoke, not even looking up from his tablet. Amanda needed to borrow some cash to pay the movers. She said you would not mind. You always help family out. I stood frozen, staring at the open safe, the magnitude of their violation washing over me in waves. Not only had they invaded my home and rearranged it to suit their needs, but they had also stolen from me $2,000. Money I had saved for emergencies, gone without so much as asking. How did you open the safe? I asked, still struggling to process what was happening. Amanda had the decency to look uncomfortable. I knew your code. It is your birthday. I have seen you use it before. And you did not think to ask before taking my money. My voice was rising now, control slipping away. My mother stepped between us, her hands raised in a placating gesture. Jacqueline, calm down. It is just money. They will pay you back once they are settled. Just money. $2,000 was just money to them, but to me it represented hours of work, careful budgeting, and responsible planning, something they had never understood or respected. How long have you been planning this? I asked suddenly, the pieces starting to fall into place. The coordinated move, the rearrangement of my home, the casual way they had taken over every space. This was not a desperate last-minute decision. My father shifted uncomfortably, exchanging glances with my mother. Their silence told me everything I needed to know. You have been planning this for a while. Have not you? I pressed. Amanda finally spoke, her voice small. About 3 weeks. The landlord gave us notice after we were late with rent again. But we knew you would say no if we asked. So you decided to just move in anyway, without permission. Did you think I would just come home from work and say, "Oh, great, you have taken over my house, stolen my money, and moved me out of my own bedroom. Welcome." We knew you would be upset at first, my mother admitted, but we thought once the initial shock wore off, you would see this is the best solution for everyone. Your sister needs help, Jacqueline. Family helps family. Family helps family. The mantra of my childhood, used time and again to justify the inequity in how we were treated. Family helps family, but somehow it was always me helping them, never the other way around. Did you tell the movers this was my house? That I had approved this move? I asked, a new suspicion forming. The guilty looks confirmed it before anyone spoke. We told them we had your permission, my father finally admitted. That you were at work but had agreed to the move. And what about the neighbors? What did you tell Sarah and John? That you were generously letting your sister's family stay with you while they looked for a new place, my mother said, as if this lie was somehow commendable. Everyone has been very impressed with your kindness. The audacity was breathtaking. They had not only invaded my home, but had also spread lies about me to my neighbors, painting themselves as welcome guests rather than intruders. And what about my trip to Chicago this weekend? I asked. I am supposed to be representing my firm at a financial conference. I have been preparing for months. Blank looks greeted me. They had no idea about the trip because they had never bothered to ask about my life or plans. I was just the responsible one, the one who would always make sacrifices for the family. We can watch the house while you are gone, Amanda offered brightly, as if doing me a favor. It will give us time to finish settling in. That was when I noticed something even more disturbing. On the counter next to the refrigerator sat a stack of mail. My mail opened, bank statements, credit card offers, and a letter from my firm about the upcoming trip. You have been going through my mail. I reached for the stack, flipping through envelopes that had clearly been opened and resealed. No one answered, but I did not need them to. The evidence was right in front of me. We need to talk about long-term arrangements, my father said, clearly trying to change the subject. Kevin thinks they can be back on their feet in about 6 months, but realistically it might take longer. Longer than 6 months, I echoed, disbelieving. Kevin finally looked up from his tablet, irritation clear on his face. What is the big deal? You have all this space for just one person. You do not need that much room anyway. The big deal, I said slowly, trying to control my rising anger, is that this is my house. I worked for it. I saved for it. I pay the mortgage, the utilities, and the taxes. It is mine, not a community resource, for whenever anyone in the family needs a place to stay. Now you are just being selfish, my mother cut in. Your sister has children, Jacqueline. Where are they supposed to go? That is not my problem, I said the words, feeling foreign in my mouth. I had never spoken to my family this way before, never stood up for myself so directly. Amanda burst into tears, burying her face in her hands. See, I told you she does not care about us. She has this big house all to herself, and she would rather see her niece and nephew homeless than share. My father put his arm around her, glaring at me. I am very disappointed in you, Jacqueline. Very disappointed indeed. This is not how we raised you. Actually, this is exactly how you raised me, I replied. You raised me to be responsible, to work hard, and to stand on my own 2 feet. Something you never expected from Amanda. Kevin stood up, his face flushed with anger. We are not leaving. We have nowhere else to go, and you cannot just throw children out on the street. What would your precious neighbors think about that? Something in his tone made me pause. What do you mean you are not leaving? This is not a negotiation. This is my house. Amanda wiped her tears, exchanging a look with my parents that sent chills down my spine. We already gave up our apartment, Jack. We cannot get it back. The lease is terminated. The full picture suddenly became clear. They had never intended this to be a temporary arrangement. They had given up their apartment completely, with no backup plan. They had made my home their only option. How much do you owe in back rent? I asked, a sinking feeling in my stomach. More uncomfortable glances. About $4,000, Kevin finally admitted. $4,000 in back rent. No wonder they had been evicted. And now I understood why they had taken my emergency money as well. 2,000 for the movers, and they probably planned to use the rest to cover other debts. And let me guess, I said, the pieces falling into place. You were hoping to live here rent-free while you sorted out your finances? We would contribute to groceries, Amanda repeated weakly. The situation is not ideal, my father acknowledged, but it is the best solution for now. Besides, we have already talked to your brother-in-law about it. My brother-in-law? I was momentarily confused. You mean Kevin? No, Michael. Your mother and I have been thinking about downsizing for a while now. Our house is too big for just the two of us. Michael mentioned he might be interested in buying it. Michael was Amanda's husband's brother, someone I had met perhaps 3 times at family gatherings. The idea that my parents had been discussing selling their home with him, someone who was practically a stranger to me, while planning to move Amanda's family into my house without my knowledge, was yet another betrayal. You are selling your house? I asked, struggling to keep up with these revelations. We have been considering it, my mother said carefully. The market is good right now, and the stairs are getting harder on your father's knees. And where were you planning to go after selling? Though I already knew the answer. My father could not quite meet my eyes. Well, we thought we might stay here for a while, too, just until we find a suitable condo. They had planned it all. Amanda and Kevin would move in with their children, followed soon after by my parents. My 3-bedroom house would become home to 7 people with me, relegated to the smallest bedroom, and my home office commandeered for the children. All without asking me. All without even telling me, until it was already happening. I felt sick. The depth of their entitlement, their complete disregard for me as an independent adult with my own life and space, was staggering. This had gone far beyond the usual family dynamics. This was a complete violation of trust and boundaries. Amanda must have sensed my growing resolve because she switched tactics. The kids were so excited when we told them they would be living with Aunt Jacqueline, she said, her voice softer now. Lily has already been telling everyone at kindergarten about her new room. Emotional manipulation. Another familiar tactic. Use the children to make me feel guilty, to make me the bad guy if I refused. I am changing the locks tomorrow, I said, my voice steady and determined. And I want all of you gone by the end of the week. You would throw your own family out. My mother gasped, hand dramatically pressed to her chest. What would people think? I do not care what people think. This is my house, and you are not welcome to live here. Any of you. My father's face darkened with anger. If this is how you treat family in their time of need, perhaps we should reconsider our will. We were planning to leave the house to you and Amanda equally, but clearly you do not need the help. One final attempt at control. Financial threats. It might have worked once, but not anymore. Not after this. Do whatever you want with your will, I said calmly. It does not change the fact that you all need to leave my house. Kevin stood up, towering over me in what I recognized as an attempt at intimidation. We are not going anywhere. We have kids. You cannot legally evict a family with children without proper notice. And there it was. They were planning to use tenant rights laws against me to force me to let them stay. They had thought this through, planned for my resistance, and were prepared to fight dirty. I looked around at their faces. These people who were supposed to love me, supposed to respect me. All I saw was entitlement and manipulation, years of patterns suddenly clear as day. But something had changed in me. The lifetime of accommodation, of making myself smaller to keep the peace, was over. We will see about that, I said softly. For a moment, the kitchen was silent. My family exchanged nervous glances, clearly unsettled by my calm demeanor. They had expected tears, shouting, perhaps eventually resignation, as had been our pattern for years. My quiet determination was new territory. "I need some air," I said, turning toward the back door. "I will be back in a few minutes." "Jack, wait," Amanda called after me. "Let us talk about this rationally." I did not respond. I stepped out onto my back porch, closed the door behind me, and took a deep breath of the cool afternoon air. The sounds of my niece and nephew playing somewhere in the front yard floated around the house. In other circumstances, their laughter might have brought me joy. Now it was just another reminder of how my family had weaponized even the children against me. I pulled out my phone and made 2 calls. The first was to the local police non-emergency line. "I need to report people who have entered my home without permission and are refusing to leave," I explained calmly to the dispatcher. "Do you know these individuals?" the dispatcher asked. "Yes, they are my family members. They used a spare key to enter while I was at work and moved their belongings in without my knowledge or consent. They are now refusing to leave when asked." The dispatcher took down my information and address. "An officer will be there shortly. In the meantime, try to avoid confrontation." My second call was to David Morgenstern, an attorney I had helped with some tax issues the previous year. He answered on the 3rd ring. "David, it is Jacqueline Wilson. I have an unusual situation and need some legal advice. My family has essentially broken into my home, moved their belongings in, and is refusing to leave when asked. What are my options?" David listened carefully as I explained the situation in more detail, including their admission that they had planned this for weeks and their threat to claim tenant rights. "They have not established tenancy yet," he assured me, "since you never gave permission, and they have only been there for hours, not days. They are essentially trespassers at this point. The police can remove them. As for their belongings, you can give them a reasonable time to retrieve everything, perhaps 24 to 48 hours. I would suggest documenting everything with photos and recordings, just in case." I thanked him and promised to update him later. Before returning inside, I took several photos of the moving truck, the boxes, and furniture in the yard, and even recorded a quick video panning across the scene. When I re-entered the house, I found my family huddled in the living room, speaking in hushed tones. They fell silent when they saw me. I noticed my mother was holding a framed photo of mine that had been on the mantel, now replaced with a picture of Amanda's family. Without a word, I walked through the house, methodically taking photos of every room, documenting how they had rearranged and taken over my space. I opened closets, drawers, cabinets, capturing evidence of their invasion. I recorded a video of my emptied master bedroom, now filled with their belongings, and another of my disrupted home office. "What are you doing?" my father demanded, following me from room to room. I did not answer. When I had thoroughly documented everything, I returned to the living room where they had gathered, looking increasingly uneasy. "I have contacted the police," I said simply. "They will be here shortly." The reaction was immediate and chaotic. My mother gasped dramatically. Amanda burst into fresh tears. My father's face turned an alarming shade of red. "You called the police on your own family," he thundered. "Have you lost your mind?" "No, I have finally found it," I replied calmly. "This is my home. You entered without permission, rearranged my belongings, and are refusing to leave when asked. That is breaking and entering, possibly burglary, considering you took my money without permission." Kevin stepped forward, anger evident in every line of his body. "You would not dare press charges against your own sister." "Watch me." I met his gaze steadily. Amanda stepped between us, her face tear-streaked and pleading. Jack, please, think of the children. They will be traumatized if they see the police taking us away. You should have thought of that before using them as pawns in your scheme, I replied, unmoved by the tears I had seen used as manipulation too many times before. I suggest you take them next door, while we sort this out. Sarah would probably be happy to have them visit for a little while. The sound of car doors slamming out front signaled the arrival of the police. 2 officers, a man and a woman, knocked on my front door moments later. I answered, inviting them in. I am Officer Bennett, and this is Officer Rodriguez. The male officer introduced them. We received a call about unwanted persons in your home. Yes, that is correct, I confirmed, gesturing to my family. These are my parents, my sister, and my brother-in-law. They used a spare key to enter my home while I was at work today, and moved their belongings in without my knowledge or permission. When I asked them to leave, they refused. Officer Rodriguez turned to my family. Is this true? My mother stepped forward, her expression a careful mask of confusion and hurt. There has been a terrible misunderstanding. We thought Jacqueline would be happy to help her sister's family in their time of need. We have always been a close family. Do you own this home, ma'am? Officer Bennett asked me. Yes. I retrieved my deed and mortgage documents from my fireproof safe, which was still open from when they had taken my emergency money. Here are my ownership papers. This house is solely in my name. The officers reviewed the documents briefly. And did you give these individuals permission to move in? Officer Rodriguez asked. Absolutely not. I had no idea they were planning this. I was at work when my neighbor called to tell me there was a moving truck in my driveway. I came home to find they had already rearranged my house and moved me out of my own bedroom. My father interrupted, his voice authoritative. Officer, this is a family matter that we can resolve ourselves. There is no need for police involvement. If the homeowner has asked you to leave her property and you are refusing, it becomes a police matter, Officer Bennett explained firmly. We have nowhere else to go, Amanda said tearfully. We have 2 small children. Surely there are laws protecting families from being put out on the street. Those laws apply to established tenants, Officer Rodriguez replied. From what I understand, you moved in today without permission, which does not establish tenancy. My mother tried again. Surely a sister would not press charges against her own family. This is just a misunderstanding that got out of hand. Officer Bennett turned to me. Ma'am, do you want to press charges? I took a deep breath. This was the moment of truth. Despite everything, these were still my family members. The people who had raised me, shaped me, even if they had also hurt me countless times. I do not want to press charges at this time, I said finally, but I do want them to leave my home immediately. Relief visibly washed over my family's faces, quickly replaced by shock at my next words. However, I do want to file a report about the $2,000 they took from my safe without permission. Kevin stepped forward aggressively. You said you would not press charges. Officer Bennett moved slightly between us. Sir, I suggest you calm down. Taking money without permission is theft, which is a separate issue. My mother frantically dug through her purse, producing a checkbook. We can repay you right now, Jacqueline. There is no need to involve the police further. I looked at the checkbook, remembering all the times their checks to me had bounced over the years. I want the cash back. Now. Realizing they had no choice, my father reluctantly went to their temporary bedroom and returned with an envelope containing my money. He handed it over with barely concealed anger. Officers, I want all of them out of my house today, I said firmly. They can have 24 hours to remove their belongings, but they cannot stay here. That is reasonable, Officer Rodriguez confirmed. You folks will need to find alternative accommodations for tonight. Do you have somewhere you can go? My parents exchanged glances, clearly unprepared for this outcome. We can go to a hotel, I suppose, my mother said reluctantly. And the moving company can store your larger items temporarily if needed, Officer Bennett added. We cannot afford storage on top of a hotel, Kevin protested. I felt a momentary pang of guilt quickly squashed by the memory of how they had planned this invasion for weeks, counting on my guilt and family obligation to force my compliance. That is not my problem, I said, echoing my earlier words. With the police present, my family had no choice but to comply. Amanda went next door to retrieve the children, while my parents and Kevin gathered overnight necessities. The officers waited patiently, ensuring there was no further conflict. As they prepared to leave, my mother made one last attempt. Jacqueline, please reconsider. We are your family. I looked at her, really. Looked at her perhaps for the first time, seeing clearly the manipulation that had defined our relationship for decades. Yes, you are. And family should respect each other's boundaries and property. You did neither. They left under the watchful eyes of the police, promising to return the next day to remove the rest of their belongings. As soon as they were gone, I called a locksmith who arrived within the hour to change every lock in the house. I paid extra for immediate service, considering it money well spent. That night alone in my disarranged home, surrounded by their boxes and furniture, I felt something unexpected peace. For the first time in my adult life, I had stood firm against the tide of family obligation and manipulation. I had protected my boundaries and my space. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. I knew my family would not give up easily, that there would be tears and guilt trips and possibly even threats. But something fundamental had shifted within me. The spell was broken. I slept on my couch that night, unwilling to use either the bed they had placed in the small room or the one they had claimed in my master bedroom. It was uncomfortable, but it was my choice, and for now, that was enough. The next morning, I called my boss first thing to explain the situation. I was honest about what had happened, though I kept the more humiliating details to myself. Mr. Lawson was surprisingly understanding. Family difficulties happen to everyone, Jacqueline. Take today to sort things out. We can reschedule the board presentation for next week. With that handled, I prepared for the inevitable return of my family. I was under no illusion that yesterday's confrontation had settled matters. They would be back, and they would have regrouped. I was right. They arrived at 9:30 this time, without the moving truck, but with reinforcements. My aunt, Linda, and Uncle Paul, my mother's sister and brother-in-law, were with them, along with my cousin Melissa. A family intervention. When I answered the door, my mother stepped forward immediately. We have come to talk sense into you, Jacqueline. This has gone far enough. I did not invite them in. Instead, I stepped onto the porch, closing the door behind me. There is nothing to discuss. You have until 5 o'clock to remove your belongings from my property. Aunt Linda stepped forward, her expression a mixture of disappointment and condescension. Jacqueline, honey, I cannot believe you would treat your sister this way. Family helps family. That is how we were all raised. Did my mother mention that they broke into my home while I was at work? That they moved me out of my own bedroom without permission? That they took money from my safe? I asked calmly. My aunt faltered slightly. Well, they said there was a misunderstanding about the timing. There was no misunderstanding. They deliberately waited until I was at work to move in, knowing I would not agree to their plan. They admitted as much. My Uncle Paul, always the peacemaker, tried next. Surely we can find a compromise. Perhaps Amanda and her family could stay just for a few weeks until they find something else. I shook my head. No, my decision is final. You always were a selfish child. My mother snapped, her pretense of reasonableness falling away. I do not know where we went wrong with you. You went wrong when you taught me that my boundaries do not matter, that my space and belongings are community and property, and that Amanda's needs always come before mine, I replied evenly. Yesterday was the result of a lifetime of those lessons. My father, who had been unusually quiet, finally spoke. You have made your choice, Jacqueline. But choices have consequences. Do not expect any help from us in the future. I never have, I said simply. They left soon after the reinforcements, clearly unprepared for my unwavering stance. For the next several hours they moved their belongings out under my watchful eye. I had taken the day off work specifically to ensure nothing of mine disappeared during the process. By 5 o'clock my house was mine again, though in disarray. It would take days to put everything back in order to reclaim my spaces, but at least they were gone. Or so I thought. The calls started that evening, first from extended family members who had heard only my parents' version of events, then from family friends. Even my mother's church group got involved. The message was always the same. I was selfish, unfeeling, a bad daughter and sister who had put her own comfort above her family's welfare. I stopped answering unknown numbers after the third call. Then I muted my social media accounts when the public shaming moved online. The most difficult call came from my grandmother, my father's mother, whom I had always respected and loved. Jacqueline, I raised your father to believe in family above all else, she said, her voice heavy with disappointment. I cannot understand how my granddaughter could turn her back on her own blood. I tried to explain my side, but she was not interested in hearing it. In her worldview, shaped by growing up during harder times, family stuck together no matter what, and private property was a luxury superseded by family needs. By the end of the week, I felt isolated and second-guessing myself. Maybe I was the selfish one. Maybe I should have found a compromise. Then Sarah from next door brought over a homemade lasagna and a bottle of wine. I saw what happened, she said simply, as we sat at my kitchen table. I heard what your mother told me about you agreeing to let them move in. I knew something was off about the whole thing. Her simple belief in my side of the story was like a lifeline. Everyone thinks I am a monster for not letting them stay, I admitted. Sarah scoffed. Sweetheart, if my family pulled something like that, I would have done exactly what you did, maybe with less restraint. Her support gave me the courage to take the next step. That weekend, I wrote a long email detailing exactly what had happened, from the unauthorized entry to the theft of my money to the rearrangement of my home without permission. I sent it to every family member who had contacted me to criticize my actions. The responses were illuminating. Some, like my Aunt Linda, doubled down on their criticism, insisting that family obligation trumped all other concerns. But others, particularly those from my generation, expressed shock at what had really happened. My cousin Melissa called to apologize for her initial judgment. Mom only told us you had refused to help Amanda when she was in need, she explained. She never mentioned they had moved in without asking first. The tide of family opinion began to shift, not entirely in my favor, but at least toward a more balanced view of the situation. Some relatives even shared similar stories of boundaries crossed and expectations abused in the name of family obligation. Meanwhile, I took practical steps to protect myself. I installed a comprehensive security system with cameras covering every entrance to my home. I consulted with David, my attorney, about obtaining a restraining order if necessary. I changed my banking passwords and moved my emergency cash to a safety deposit box at my bank. At work, I threw myself into preparing for the rescheduled board presentation. The focus required was actually therapeutic, giving me something concrete to concentrate on besides family drama. The presentation went well, earning praise from Mr. Lawson and the board members. Afterward, Mr. Lawson called me into his office. "You handled that admirably, especially considering the week you have had," he said. "I want you to know that your job is secure here, Jacqueline. In fact, we are considering you for the senior accounting manager position opening up next quarter." His words were a balm to my bruised spirit. At least in my professional life, my hard work and dedication were recognized and valued. 2 weeks after the incident, I received a text from Amanda. "Can we talk just us? No mom and dad." I agreed to meet her at a coffee shop neutral territory. She looked different somehow, smaller, without our parents flanking her. "I am sorry," she said after we had settled with our drinks. "What we did was wrong. I knew it was wrong, even while we were planning it." I did not respond immediately, waiting to see if this was genuine or just another manipulation tactic. "Kevin and I have been in a financial mess for years," she continued, when I remained silent. "We have never learned to budget or save. We just expected bailouts from mom and dad, or from you. This situation forced us to finally face reality." "Where are you staying now?" I asked, curious, despite myself. "We found a 2-bedroom apartment. It is much smaller than what we are used to and in a less desirable area, but it is what we can actually afford." She stirred her coffee unnecessarily. "Kevin is not happy about it, but he is looking for a second job. I am too." It was more responsibility than I had ever heard her take. "And mom and dad." "Still furious with you," she admitted. "They think you betrayed the family. But I think maybe they enabled us too much, made us dependent." She looked up, meeting my eyes directly. "I do not want my kids growing up thinking the world owes them everything." I felt a glimmer of hope, not for an immediate reconciliation, but for a possible healthier relationship in the future. "It will take time for me to trust any of you again," I said honestly. She nodded. "I understand. I just wanted you to know that I see what we did wrong, and I am trying to change." Our conversation lasted nearly 2 hours, covering years of family dynamics, resentments, and expectations. It was the most honest talk we had ever had. When we parted, nothing was fully resolved, but a door had been opened. My parents took longer. Nearly a month passed before my father called. The conversation was stiff, formal, nothing like the easy relationship we had once had. But it was a start. "Your mother and I have been discussing things," he said. "We still believe family should come first, but perhaps we should have respected your space and asked permission first." It was as close to an apology as I was likely to get. "Thank you for acknowledging that," I said, not pushing for more. "We would like to see you sometime," he added. "Perhaps dinner next weekend." I agreed with conditions. At a restaurant, not at your house or mine, and just us for now, not Amanda and Kevin. He accepted my terms, and a fragile rebuilding began. Throughout this period, I found unexpected support in my community. Sarah and John next door invited me for dinner regularly. Colleagues at work checked in on me. Even my neighbor on the other side, an elderly man I had barely spoken to before, brought over tomatoes from his garden as a gesture of solidarity after hearing about the situation. I also found a support group for adults dealing with boundary issues in families. The stories I heard there made me realize how common such dynamics were, how many people struggled with family members who took advantage or crossed lines. It was comforting in a sad way to know I was not alone. The most surprising support came from Kevin's brother Michael, the one my parents had been discussing selling their house to. He called me out of the blue one evening. I wanted you to know I had no idea what they were planning, he said. Your parents mentioned downsizing and asked if I might be interested in their house, but they never said anything about moving in with you. I would never have been part of that scheme. His call confirmed what I had suspected. My family had been making arrangements on multiple fronts, all designed to solve Amanda and Kevin's financial problems at my expense. 3 months after the incident, I was finally feeling more settled. My house was back in order, my relationships with extended family were healing, and I had established clear boundaries with my immediate family. Then came the text from my mother. Amanda and Kevin are separating. She needs a place to stay with the kids. My heart sank as I read it, anticipating another attempt to move Amanda into my home. But the next text surprised me. Your father and I have offered our spare room. We are converting the craft room back into a bedroom. We should have done this from the beginning. It was the closest thing to an admission of wrongdoing I had ever received from my mother. I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. They were finally taking responsibility for helping Amanda in a way that did not involve imposing on me. That night, I sat on my back porch, sipping tea and reflecting on the past few months. The incident had been painful, disruptive, and at times heartbreaking, but it had also been clarifying. Like a storm that clears the air, it had swept away years of unhealthy patterns and expectations, forcing everyone to see our family dynamics more clearly. I was not naive enough to think everything was fixed. Old habits die hard, and I knew there would be slips and tests of my boundaries in the future. But something fundamental had changed. I had changed. And in standing up for myself, I had ultimately done what was best for everyone, even those who had tried to take advantage of me. The house around me felt truly mine again, a sanctuary I had fought for and defended. And though the path forward with my family would likely never be smooth, it would at least be honest. That I decided was worth all the difficulty of the past months. 6 months after what I now simply call the incident, I hosted a small gathering at my home. It was nothing elaborate, just an informal dinner party with close friends, but it felt significant. This was the first time since the invasion that I had invited a group into my space. Sarah and John from next door were there, of course, along with a few colleagues from work and 2 friends from my support group. The house was filled with conversation and laughter, the kind of warmth I had always wanted my home to contain. As I moved around the kitchen, putting final touches on dessert, Sarah joined me. You seem different, she observed, helping me arrange cookies on a platter. More at peace. I considered her words. I think I am. Standing up to my family was the hardest thing I have ever done, but also the most necessary. And how are things with them now? It was a complex question. The past 6 months had been a journey of small steps, some forward, some back. Better in some ways, different in others. My relationship with Amanda had actually improved the most. Without our parents mediating and enabling, we had begun to develop a more honest connection. She and the children were still living with my parents, but she had found a steady job and was saving for her own place. Kevin had moved to another state for work after their separation, and while he still saw the children monthly, Amanda was learning to function as a single parent. She called me last week to ask for budgeting advice, I told Sarah with a small smile. Not for money, just advice. That is a first. My parents were a more complicated story. They had eventually offered a more complete apology, acknowledging that their actions had been wrong and disrespectful, but old patterns were hard to break. They still occasionally made comments suggesting I was selfish for living alone in such a big house, though they no longer pushed for Amanda to move in with me. We are working on it, I summarized. We have family dinner once a month now, on neutral ground at a restaurant. It is civil, sometimes even pleasant. "And what about you, beyond the family stuff?" Sarah asked. That was the more interesting part of the story. The incident had sparked changes in me that extended far beyond my family relationships. I have gotten better at setting boundaries in all areas of my life, I explained. At work, with friends, even with myself. It was true. After successfully standing up to my family, I had found the courage to speak up in other situations where I previously would have remained silent. I had declined projects at work that would have overwhelmed me, renegotiated a client relationship that had become one-sided, and even ended a friendship that had long been more draining than supportive. I used to think that taking care of everyone else's needs before my own was the right thing to do, I continued. I thought it made me a good person, a good daughter and sister. But all it did was teach people that my needs did not matter. Sarah nodded thoughtfully. It is a hard lesson. Many people never learn it. The gathering continued late into the evening, and as my guests departed, each thanked me warmly for my hospitality. When the last person had gone, I moved around the house, tidying up, feeling contentment in the quiet. My home truly felt like mine again. I had reclaimed every space, erasing the memory of the invasion. The master bedroom was once again my peaceful retreat, the home office restored to its former function. Even the smallest bedroom had been reimagined as a combination guest room and reading nook exactly as I wanted it. But the physical reclamation was only a small part of the healing. The more profound change had been internal. I had always defined myself in relation to others, particularly my family. I was the responsible one, the reliable one, the one who would always sacrifice her own needs to keep the peace. That identity had been comfortable in its familiarity, even as it chafed. The incident had forced me to confront a difficult truth. My accommodating nature had not been serving me or my family. By always giving in, I had enabled behavior that was ultimately harmful to everyone involved. Amanda and Kevin had never learned financial responsibility. My parents had never recognized me as a fully independent adult, and I had never truly stood up for myself. In the painful aftermath, as family members had taken sides and relationships had strained to breaking, I had questioned my decision countless times. Had I done the right thing? Was I indeed the selfish person they accused me of being? Time and distance had provided clarity. Standing firm had been an act of love, not just for myself, but for all of them. Like a parent who enforces necessary rules despite a child's protests, I had established boundaries that would ultimately lead to healthier relationships. Amanda was now learning financial independence. My parents were reconsidering their enabling patterns. Even extended family members had begun reflecting on their own boundary issues after the conversation sparked by our situation. As I finished tidying the kitchen, I noticed a small gift bag on the counter that Sarah had left behind. Inside was a decorative wooden sign with the simple message, "This is my happy place." A note tucked alongside read, "For the woman brave enough to defend her happy place. Love, Sarah and John." I hung it by my front door, a daily reminder of the lesson I had learned at such cost, that true love, whether for family, friends, or self, involves respect for boundaries. That sometimes the most loving act is to say no. That maintaining healthy limits is not selfish, but necessary for genuine relationships to flourish. The journey had been painful, but the destination was worth it. I had discovered a strength I never knew I possessed, and a peace I had never experienced before. My house was truly my home now, not just because my name was on the deed, but because I had fought for it, defended it, and in doing so, defined myself. As I prepared for bed that night, I thought about the long road still ahead with my family. Rebuilding trust would take time. Old patterns would resurface and need to be addressed. There would be setbacks and difficult conversations. But I was ready. The woman who had come home 6 months ago to find her house invaded was not the same woman who now moved confidently through her reclaimed space. I had changed, grown, strengthened. And in that strength I had found a compassion that demanded accountability rather than enabling that loved enough to require respect. The most profound lesson had been that sometimes the firmest boundaries create the space for the healthiest love to grow. By refusing to be diminished, I had opened the possibility for all of us to become more fully ourselves, to relate to each other as adults rather than falling into childhood patterns. It was not an easy lesson, nor a comfortable one, but it was transformative. As I drifted off to sleep in my peaceful bedroom, I felt gratitude for the difficult path that had led me here. The invasion of my home had been a violation, but it had also been the catalyst for a necessary awakening. Sometimes, the hardest moments in our lives become our greatest teachers if we are brave enough to learn their lessons. What boundaries have you had to set with family or friends? Have you ever had to stand up for yourself, even when others called you selfish? Let me know in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe to hear more stories about finding strength in difficult situations. Thank you for listening to my journey. And remember that protecting your peace is never selfish, it is necessary. Share this with someone who might need to hear this message today.